Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. So I'm Dr. Kim Harris, and I am Assistant Professor of African American Thought and Practice here at Loyola Marymount University. And I'm so glad to be in conversation with...
Hello, I'm Dr. Darnise Martin, Clinical Associate Professor in African American Studies, and we are together happy to be here with another exciting program for the Center for Religion and Spirituality at Loyola Marymount. Thanks for joining us. We plan to have a rousing conversation about the intersections of being Black and Catholic and all such interesting things. So, but first up, we do have, Dr. Kim, we have some announcements and some little commercial that we'd like to offer, and an acknowledgement of the day. So I will allow you to do that.
Okay, but you want to start with the announcements and then I'll move into the acknowledgements.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, as I said, we are here, the Center for Religion and Spirituality at LMU. And so we have a program that we are working on. Is in development. Those of you who are watching really may be interested to know we're working on a program, an online program that will talk about the intersection of being Black and Catholic, an ongoing online program that emphasizes anti-racism within the curriculum. We really want to make sure we address the moment and be proactive in our programming. So that is a program. We have a community partner, the African American Catholic Center for Evangelization, and we partner with them locally. And we hope to partner with other people across the country as well as we continue this program. And did you have one too?
Yes, well, we have upcoming for the Summer Speakers Series for the African American Catholic Center for Evangelization on July the 18th at 3 p.m. on Zoom, 3 p.m. Pacific time. We have Dr. Ansel Augustine. Really looking forward to him being a part of our speaker series. And he will be speaking about anti-racism work in youth and young adult ministry. And it's really incredible. He is a wonderful speaker, and he actually he's originally from New Orleans, but now he is in Washington, D.C. With the Office of Black Ministry in the Archdiocese of Washington. And then we will be having another speaker series guest, that's to be announced, but save the date, August the 22nd. And that will be at 3 p.m. And they usually go from about 3 until 4:30. So please, that would be fantastic for you to join us from that. And that will also be on Zoom. And then for our acknowledgement of the day, because this day that we're recording this day that we're broadcasting, is the 8th of April, is Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. And so we stand in solidarity with Jewish people in America and Israel and around the world as we take time to remember those horrific events and say, never again, never again. And we also acknowledge that we are on Tonva land, the original peoples of this land. And at this time, the Tonva are really mourning one of their incredible elders. And her name is Julia Bogani. And she's a revered Tonga elder and cultural ambassador. And unfortunately, she died just recently at the age of 72. And as I think about her and the cultural work that she did, I heard her this morning. I heard a recording of her, and she said, there are things that we need to do that we do with ourselves within our own group, but we also need to do things outside of our group so people know who we are. And here's the quote that really got me. She said, Tongva women never left their ancestral homeland. They just became invisible. How do we make ourselves not invisible? And as I heard her talking about that this morning, that definitely touched me in a particular way, because when I think about being Black and Catholic in the Catholic Church and being Black and Catholic in the wider Black church, I often talk about and feel a double invisibility. And I know, Dr. Darnise, you and I were talking about this just the other week, because we both spent a lot of time watching the wonderful documentary, The Black Church, with Dr. Henry Louis Gates. And what was amazing, it was that as he talked about the Black church, except at the very beginning, there wasn't anything in there so much about Black Catholics. Even though some of the settings of where he was speaking were St. Sabina's Church in Chicago, with an incredible painting of a Black Jesus holding his hands out. And yet the Black Catholic experience was rarely mentioned. And I think I said even to you that in some of those, when they do their fundraising, and so they were asking Dr. Gates, they said, so what surprised you as you were researching? And the things he talked about were about Black Catholics. He said he didn't really know about how many people were already Black and Catholic before they were taken from their homeland in the Kingdom of the Congo. And he didn't know about, the 3 to 4 million of us Black Catholics who are here in the United States right now. And so he kept saying things that surprised him, and they had to do with Black Catholics. So what were you thinking about that, Dr. Darnise?
So it's always interesting when there's a program about the Black church, right? It's become almost a monolithic way of speaking. And it tends to cover the same ground almost every time, right? Like, we know the value of educating, the world, but it does tend to get packaged the same way. And so I guess I wasn't even surprised to say that there was an invisibility to people who are Black and Catholic. That's a particular intersection, right, of being Black and Catholic.
Yes.
And so I hate to say that I wasn't entirely surprised, but I was a little bit, because, we like to think that we get better as we go on and as we do these things. And here, Henry Louis Gates he's a scholar at Harvard and has a lot of resources at his hand, at his fingertips. So a little bit, I was like, wow, still, right? So in watching the Black church, I thought, well, here we go again, again, it's always important, but as the conversation has to be diverse, has to be robust, I thought, wow. And so that's why, part of the inspiration for us having this particular conversation is so that we do something about this invisibility, right? It's like, it's an invisibility until you start talking about it. And then people say, oh yeah, I remember this, or, oh yeah, right. Oh yeah, right. And you're like, well, how come, if people sort of kind of know a little bit, why does it still fly under the radar so much? And
absolutely.
And that's it's a weird question. And, this country, America, is, a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant nation. So it is said, but not entirely, obviously. And there's a richness to what Catholicism has brought. Hey, we have the second Catholic president right now.
Right.
That's a big old deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I'll bounce it back to you. Those are my thoughts in terms of the invisibility, even within a program that says, it's focused upon the Black church. Well, really what you meant to say was predominantly the Protestant traditions from, pretty much from the plantation to the present. But it's so much richer. And, Dr. Kim has a lot more for us tonight, because
yes.
Well,
how about just two small historical nuggets? One of them talking about people that were brought over from the Kingdom of the Congo. If you begin studying Black history, the Stono Rebellion in 1739 in the British colony of South Carolina was a rebellion that undergirding it were Black Catholics from the Kingdom of the Congo. The date they chose to have the rebellion, Sunday, September the 9th, was actually associated with the birth of Mary. Even the words that they cried out about, a word that translates as salvation, is also related to Mary, the Mother of God. The color that they wore, and they wore white, also related to Mary, the Mother of God. There were parts of it that had Catholic resonances through and through, but you don't often hear the Stono Rebellion spoken about in those kinds of terms. And where were they trying to go? They were trying to head south to get into St. Augustine, to get to Fort Mose. That was one of the first Black Catholic towns in what would eventually become the United States. And it was in Florida at that time, because the Spanish said, if you make it here and you convert to Catholicism, you will be free. So they were heading in that direction. So it's amazing how much of that, how much of Black Catholic identity, and really it's permeating that kind of Black history. And then just to give one more historical nugget, and this is one of my favorites because of my work as a musician. And, you know, I think I'll even share my screen on this. How about this? All right, so here we go, everybody. So just to show you something, this is a spiritual, part of the historic Negro spirituals from the 1867 book, Slave Songs of the United States. Now, talk about hidden in plain sight. When you look in that early gathering of spirituals and you look at songs that were sung by the Black Civil War soldiers, one of their favorites to sing was Hail Mary, Hail. Now, you know, when you see a title like Hail Mary, Hail, that you know that it was some Black Catholics that helped to get that together. Now, I'll give you just a little bit of how it goes. I want some valiant soldier here. I want some valiant soldier here. I want some valiant soldier here to help me bear the cross. Oh, Hail Mary, Hail. Oh, Hail Mary, Hail. Oh, Hail Mary, Hail, to help me bear the cross. Oh, Hail Mary, Hail. Oh, Hail Mary, Hail. Oh, Hail Mary, Hail, to help me bear the cross. When you think about Black Civil War soldiers, it was a mix, especially in South Carolina. It was a mix of people who were Catholic tradition, people who were Protestant traditions, people who had Islam as a part of their traditions. And, you know, as they were gathering together and coming up with the kinds of things that would help them fight for their own freedom, well, that Catholic tradition came through. And so there have been times actually in the 1960s when after the Second Vatican Council and after Sacrosanctum Concilium, after the document on sacred liturgy, when new music and music that was more indigenous to various peoples became a part of the Mass, there were people that said, well, you can't use spirituals, they aren't Catholic. And yet there were songs that were a part of that early gathering of spirituals, you know, like Michael Row the Boat Ashore, you know, songs like that were a part of that slave songs of the United States. And yes, Catholics had a part in all of that early history. Mm-hmm. So Dr. Darnise, I saw you writing something. So what are you thinking about?
Well, I was just writing down the Stono Rebellion. I was thinking about my trip to Savannah and Charleston, South Carolina, 2019.
Yes.
And,
yes.
And I think that's the first time I learned about St. Augustine, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you say that, I'm like, wow, again, certain things are present, like the spiritual you just saying, like there it is right in front of us, but still there's an invisibility. So, here I am, an educator, and I'm not really connecting the dots about where I am so close to Northern Florida right there. But to know, like, oh, if I can get to this town in Florida and convert, well, to become Catholic, then I'm free. Well, there should have been a B line, right? Why isn't this much more? I mean, when we tell the stories about insurrectionists and the different ways that African Americans resisted slavery, like, why isn't this a thing that we really hold up? Maybe it's because it was the Spanish, right? And so that wouldn't go along with the American narrative. So, oh, well, they lost their territory, so we don't talk about them anymore.
Right.
So I was thinking too, well, gosh, why are things falling through the cracks? And well, in the first place, because as it falls through the cracks, and then there's no way to, or I guess it becomes more of a challenge to keep educating, the different generations, because somewhere along the line it fell through the cracks. Like, who's singing that song that you just sang? Who's singing it? Where? Why? So that the question could even arise. Wait, they're singing about Mary? Wait, who? Who are these people? Right?
Yes.
Where did they come from? What do you mean they'd already been baptized before they got here?
Yes.
There's a whole set of questions that would arise in a person's mind when you're looking at something or hearing a song or, learning about this city in Florida. There's a whole set of other questions that come along. But I think there's a breakdown somewhere.
Absolutely. And when you think of it, what's very interesting is that as we study things like the revolution in Haiti and how many people from there, free and enslaved, wound up coming to places like New York City, it's from there that we have some of our early Black Catholic, we'll call them saints in waiting, or people along the road to sainthood, because as you know, at this point, we are in 2021. And there is not an African American saint in the United States. We don't have an African American canonized saint. Now you keep thinking, this is 2021. What is the holdup? So we have some.
What is the holdup? What are we waiting for?
We have people along the road to sainthood, and I know some who are watching this, they'll know these names very well. But I'll give a bit of a roll call because it's only 6, and yet when you think about these people and the kind of contributions that they had. So we'll start off with Venerable Pierre Toussaint. Now, I guess I could share my screen. Why not, right?
Nah.
I'm going to say, one of the few things I've got fairly well.
Well, as teachers, that's what we do. Every time we speak, we're typing in the chat, simultaneously doing things.
Yes, indeed. And so thinking about, all right, so I'll get this organized here. Our saints in waiting, or people along the way to sainthood. And we're very much wishing and hoping and praying that they will be fully canonized very soon. So we begin with Venerable Pierre Toussaint. And as you see, and I'm on the website of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, so USCCB. You see, philanthropist and a founder of charitable works in New York, early New York, born a slave in Haiti and brought from Haiti to the United States. And he actually made a good amount of money when he was enslaved and when he was free, because he was a hairstylist and very much in demand. What? And what did he do? Well, on the death of his master, he gained his freedom. And he certainly, as this says, was one of the amazing Black entrepreneurs of his time. And talk about pandemics. During the yellow fever epidemics, Pierre Toussaint would risk his life nursing the sick and the dying. And what is very interesting is that when you go to New York City in St. Patrick's Cathedral, he's the only lay person who is buried there. His remains are there. So I've definitely visited his tomb, and we're hoping and praying that he will be fully canonized soon. Servant of God, Mother Mary Elizabeth Lange. Now it's interesting because sometimes you hear people say her name Lang or Lange. Once again, Cuban born of Haitian descent. And came to, she was in Baltimore, foundress and first superior general of the Oblate Sisters of Providence, the first religious congregation of African-American women in the history of the Catholic Church. And that order, they continue to teach and do incredible ministry right down to our day. But when you read her story, there were people that said, African-American women, they are not capable of keeping the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, especially chastity. Black bodies weren't seen as being able to be chaste. So she is along the way to sainthood. So yes, if you're writing this down, please look all these people up. Venerable Henriette Delisle. So she was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, an incredible person. I think when you look at her, you see how beautiful she is. I think some people wanted her to become, what would we say, a consort?
Oh, yes.
A concubine. But she was not going to do that. She resisted that kind of ideal, but she also founded an order of religious women, the Congregation of the Sisters of the Holy Family. And she was certainly known for many works of mercy. She consecrated herself totally to God without reservation for the instruction of African Americans, principally those who were enslaved, but I'm sure she also was working with the free people of color. That's a whole other story.
Right.
And the Venerable Father Augustus Tolton. Now, he was the first truly acknowledged African-American priest. Now, he wasn't the first African-American priest, but they
put a little asterisk next to that.
Yes, we have to say that. And you all can look that up because the Healy brothers, one who became president of Georgetown University, another one who became the second bishop, I believe, of Portland, Maine. They both had a white father and African-American mother, but because of how they looked, they actually passed for white. So the first acknowledged African-American priest, Father Augustus Tolton, incredible man. And when you look up the first Black Catholic Congress, there he was, presiding for that liturgy, just incredible stories. And I really think he died from the stress that his life had to undergo. He wanted so badly to be ordained and was just turned down again and again and again because there was no seminary that would take him here in the United States. Servant of God, Julia Greeley, born in Hannibal, Missouri. And she is famous in the Denver area for all of the charitable works that she did, working for Catholics and non-Catholics alike. These are incredible people. And then my favorite, servant of God, Sister Dr. Thea Bowman of the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration. Now, she is alive. You can see here, she was alive much closer to our own time. She was working for cultural competence. She was working to help people learn more about the spirituals. She was a doctor of English literature, and she was also working to improve education for Black Catholics in particular, but for all people. And she was doing anti-racist work at a time before you even quite called it that. So there are many of us who are hoping that she will become the first canonized Black Catholic saint, especially just because of the kind of work she did and the kind of work that we are continuing to do now. Now, these are people, I'm sure you've heard their names before. I know Dr. Darnise, but these are incredible people. And we keep saying, why aren't there Black Catholic saints?
Right.
There are African saints, for sure, but there are not any Black Catholic saints.
Well, doesn't that just speak to the Americas, for one? Secondly, and I'd like to point out to people that you can search on YouTube for Sister Thea Bowman and find video clips of her, because she's very much a contemporary person. And I recently came upon a clip, on YouTube when you're searching stuff, whatever you're watching, then there's other
yes, all these other things are showing up. Yes,
exactly right. We live in that kind of world. And so Sister Thea Bowman showed up, and it was just a very quick clip of her addressing, I don't know what the group was, but it was basically she was addressing a group of priests who were, 99% white in the room. Mm-hmm. And she was talking about the importance of Black culture to being a part of being Catholic. So I just wanted people to know that, these are not people, all of them are not people who, died hundreds of years ago. But Sister Thea Bowman is somebody you can, look up and watch her, and say, wow, how I never heard of her.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is that she was addressing the United States Catholic bishops at that time. And she was, her topic was, what does it mean to be Black and Catholic? And she says that means, well, the first thing she does is sing. So, I'm going to take a singing break now, because that's what I do. Okay. Now, when she said, what does it mean to be Black and Catholic? This is the spiritual she sang. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home, a long way from home. Now, when she's singing that, you're thinking, yes, if people say the church is my mother, she said, I feel like a motherless child. And then she goes on to say, to this gathering of bishops, and this was not long before she died, actually, of breast cancer. And she said to them, what does it mean to be Black and Catholic? She says, it means I bring myself, my whole self, as a gift to the church. And then she says something really funny. She says, that doesn't frighten you, does it? And every time I hear that, I always chuckle, because I thought there were probably some of those bishops that were absolutely frightened.
Yeah.
That, this Black woman, because she talks about, Black Catholics building the very stones of the churches, that they had to sit in the back of those. They had to sit in the balcony. They had to be the last to receive communion. Now, you might think that kind of thing was long, long, long ago, but, I attended just the other night a talk by Olga Segura, who wrote this book called Birth of a Movement, Black Lives Matter in the Catholic Church. And at her talk, when they had the Q&A, one of the participants talked about how she, and it was an elder, one of our elders, and she talked about how she had gone into Catholic churches where she either had to sit in the back or in the balcony, or she was allowed to sit when she wanted to. But when it came time to go up for communion, She did receive, the body of Christ. And when it came time to drink from the chalice, the priest put his hand over the chalice so that she could not drink. So this is in the lifetimes of many people watching, in the lifetimes. It's an incredible thing to think of what Black Catholics have faced, even as we've been coming together in all kinds of positive ways. Things like the National Black Catholic Congress. There were 5 of them in the 1800s, and then nobody knows exactly why they stopped. And, I kept doing some research to try to find out, but I think that probably there were some people, I imagine maybe some bishops, that thought they were getting a bit too radical, a bit too uppity. And the person that ran them was Daniel Rudd. He wasn't a priest, but he was a newspaper person. So, that's dangerous right there. Yeah. And then that, the National Black Catholic Congress, it was revived again in the 1980s and 90s. And it continues to this day. It's once every 5 years. But it's so, incredible kinds of things are going on. And yet we still have to deal with so much discrimination, so much of people not understanding who we are or even seeing who we are.
Well, I have a question because I think some people, as we talk about the invisibility of Catholicism in general, let alone Black Catholicism, or prejudice that still exists around Catholicism. So, as we talk about these people who are up for sainthood, if we could just take a moment to even talk about what that is, because people have so much misunderstandings about the saints as part of Catholic worship, or people have in their minds like, oh, these people, do they become gods? Do you worship them? And so if you could take a moment and just say, well, what is that to be canonized?
Yes, they are people who we hold up. They are heroes and sheroes. We'll put it that way. And they are people, and it's interesting, and I know you can talk much more about this, Dr. Darnise, but they are ancestors in the faith, and they are people. You don't pray to a saint. What you say is, pray for us. You want your ancestors to pray for you. Now, many of us can think about, beloved ancestors that we have, grandma this or great grandma, great grandpa, our ancestors. And as we're going through the things we're going through in life, as we're going through those things, you want some reinforcements when you are praying. And so in many ways, these are people who officially are seen as ones who live exemplary lives, ones who you can say, while I'm praying, pray for me too. And what's interesting that, my students know, I always burst into song at some point, right?
And we love it because everybody can. I cannot.
But it's interesting to me because even as many people say, oh, this idea of, having ancestors pray for you. Well, there's an interesting, one of the alternate versions of Nobody Knows the Trouble I See. Spiritual goes like this. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Nobody knows like Jesus. Oh, mothers, won't you pray for me? Fathers, won't you pray for me? Oh, sisters, won't you pray for me? And help me to drive old Satan away. Oh, help me to drive old Satan away. So that idea of having people praying for you, that is what saints do. And that canonization process, as we were looking at that list of those who are on the road to sainthood, when you see, some of their names, some of them are called venerable, some are called servant of God. They are people who they're along the way because, and we don't have time to go into it all tonight, but they are on the steps of being officially recognized as saints within the Catholic Church. And so there are a few things that does, that idea of identity, that idea of saying, yes, we are part of this church. What does it mean to have someone like servant of God, Sister Dr. Thea Bowman? If she gets canonized, and let me tell you, she looks like you and me, honey. So, but what does it mean? She really does. And a college professor, hey, we are.
She's bruh.
That's right. So she's hallelujah with us right now. But that idea of ancestors praying for us. Now, could you talk a little bit about Dr. Darnise, how, because I know that you've done work on these ideas and how they come out of our African and African-American traditions, the idea of ancestors praying for you, being present with you.
Yeah. And I mean, I was going to say this notion of the role that Catholicism has played early on in African Americans or Africans in the New World is substantial. As you mentioned, Haiti, there's French Catholicism. Those Africans meet up with French Catholicism, and in Cuba, it's Spanish Catholicism, which, so in Brazil, it's Brazilian Catholicism. And the kind of mixing that happened with the African and Catholicism here is often overlooked again. We, those Black people, those of us in the New World, we understand that, okay, we came here through the slave trade and we look at that. But we also forget to look in the detail and say, what are some of the ways that those Africans were able to transform, to transmute, to survive? And one of the things that I research is this combination or the syncretism of the African and the Catholic, especially in those contexts, because when we look at some of the religious mixes, the syncretisms in those spaces, Vodun or Afro-Brazilian religions, Afro-Cuban religions, the Catholicism is still what's visible on the surface. So if you were to observe someone in those spaces throughout the Caribbean, throughout Latin America, I mean, I mentioned Brazil, we could also say Peru, there's a whole, all over.
Right, we sure could.
What you'd see is, or what it might look like to the casual observer is, oh, wow, all these Black people are Catholic. And then, you might, if you were invited to their home or you ask them something more specifically, you'd say, well, what's this you got going on here? What's this altar with your ancestors on it? What's this, what you got going on, right? It's a mixing of cultures, and we can never really have a alive religious practice without our culture. Which absolutely is what Thea Bowman was saying that you just pointed out, right? Like, I don't want to have to compartmentalize myself. And in fact, I can't, I won't, even if you think that I'm compartmentalizing myself. And that's why I say, when you look at those people, Black people throughout the New World, they look like they might have compartmentalized, but actually not. And so the way that they were understanding, the pantheon, or the community of saints or whatever, is through this African lens of, the multiplicity. That looks like a multiplicity, but there's an understanding of the one creator. Yes. So, it's not unusual or unique to Catholicism to have, let's say, a full community in heaven.
Absolutely.
without the notion that, oh, we're somehow worshiping our ancestors, but we recognize that there's an ongoing community.
Yes.
We take strength and solace from our community. And why wouldn't we? Some of us have just gone on to glory already, but we still remember them.
Mm-hmm.
Still acknowledge that they gave us something. They gave us their very own DNA, right? But they gave us strength and courage and the ability to survive. And yeah, we want to lift that up. And for African American people, it's like, okay, well, I see you have this Catholic thing. Okay, well, we mix that all together.
And, then when you think about, Black Catholics up, in the United States, especially with the mix that we were with the spirituals, what did they hear? What were they composing when they said, mothers, won't you pray for me, and help me drive old Satan away? So thinking about that community of saints, those ones who continue to help us along the way with their prayers. So, well, this is incredible. So what other kinds of things? Well, all right, now I got to tell you a story, because we think about, what is it like for Black Catholics today? Now, here in Los Angeles, there are still some of the historic Black Catholic parishes. Now, how did they become that? Because of redlining, because African Americans, we weren't allowed to live in certain places in the city. So where those, racist practices of keeping us from buying homes in certain places, well, where that happened, that's where you have the historic Black Catholic parishes. Now, these days, people are able to move out into other places and other areas, but there's some of those parishes that are still there. And you wonder, what is happening in these parishes? Well, incredible kinds of work. First of all, liturgically, you're going to have different combinations of colors, and the environment is going to reflect African and African American aesthetics. You're going to have musics. Now, when you think about how people talk about Black people, it's like, well, Black people, all they're singing is gospel music. Well, no. Black Catholics, just like any other Black community, we are not monolithic. So you might hear someone doing some chant, some Gregorian chant, so someone might be saying, let's see, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Now, a Black person might put a little something, something on it, because that's what we do. There are times when the scholars will say, well, you Blackanized it, or you did whatever, but it still is actually Gregorian chant. It still is Gregorian chant. And then we might be doing some of the hymns that would come from, we'll say, the white Catholic experience that we love and touch us very deeply. Things like, let me think about, be not afraid, I go before you always. Come follow me, and I will give you rest. Yes, we might be doing that. And then you turn around again and look, and we're doing, I need you. You need me. We're all a part of God's body. Stand with me. Agree with me. So yes, we might be doing some contemporary gospel music. These days, we're just longing to get a chance to all sing together.
Almost.
But thinking about the range of music that you might hear, the preaching, there are many who are preaching now. Unfortunately, here in Los Angeles, we don't have, I think now we have one African American priest, the entire archdiocese, one. And we had to borrow him, invite him, steal him from outside. But he's somebody that we definitely are. We are so glad he's here. Now, we may have two, because there actually is a Black priest who is preaching in the seminary. Somebody say amen.
All right, because that's a thing for us in the African American folk Christianities. That's a thing. The preaching has to reach, right? The call and response. And of course, people have an misunderstanding, such as it may be, that, oh no, a Catholic priest is going to give a dry homily. Oh no. And it's going to be quick. And, it's over, a whole mass is over in an hour.
Right.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because we have a Black man teaching homiletics. Is that?
Yes. So the whole idea of what is it, talk about bringing our whole selves, right? Bringing our whole selves. Now, he's teaching it to white, predominantly white and Latinx seminarians, but he brings a Black aesthetic to it. So it'll be interesting. He's bringing his whole self. So, so that is really amazing. So when you think about what is going on in Black Catholic parishes, now the other thing is in not only the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, but, in so many places around the country, the fastest growing edge within African and African American Catholic communities are people who are from Ghana, people who have immigrated from Ghana, people who have immigrated from Nigeria. So you might have a parish that has the mass that is at 10 o'clock in the morning, has an African American aesthetic. The mass at 1 o'clock in the afternoon has an Igbo and Nigerian aesthetic. The priest is originally from Nigeria, and that's a whole other set of issues, concerns, connections. So then you say, well, how? Some people would think, well, that's all fine. Everybody's got dark skin, but culture matters.
I was going to say that. Okay, now it makes the whole thing richer, but there's still, in terms of African American and African, or what we say, more recent African Americans coming straight from the continent. There's another cultural mix that's happening there, where people really may say, no, I want to go to my Igbo, mass, not necessarily the African American one, because culture matters.
Culture matters. Now, what's interesting though, and as we're recording this, we just came out of Holy Week. There are times, especially where in parishes that are mixed heritage, because you'll also find many of the historic Black parishes also have a Latinx community. But when it comes time for Holy Week and you have those really big celebrations, that central celebration of our faith, celebrations of our faith tradition, you're not going to do those twice. So then what happens when you begin to bring the cultures together? And it can't just be, we're going to say everything in English, and then we're going to say everything in Spanish, and then we're going to say everything in Igbo, or, some of it. No.
Right.
So, besides, then you have people that speak all three of those languages that will be incredibly bored. So then we have to think about, how do we bring together all of who we are? And so, those are some of the liturgical questions and concerns that Black Catholics are having at this time. Now, other questions and concerns. All right, here's another story.
Wow.
I send my students, I teach, 2 different classes here at Loyola Marymount, and, I send them out to visit churches and actually to visit worship sites. So some of the students might go to visit, Catholic church, and some go to Episcopal church, some go to a synagogue, some go to a mosque, so sending them out to various places, go to a Hindu temple, and it's always an interesting experience. Now, of course, during this pandemic time, they've been able to do it online. And in some ways there is in some ways it's a challenge because you don't get the full kind of experience, but in some ways it's also good because you can, it's a little bit less frightening. And I used to think until about 2 weeks ago that the people who would be challenged and a bit nervous about doing this, that was all going to be about the students. Mm-hmm. But then last week, one of my students went to a Black Catholic parish, and actually a really wonderful parish here in the Archdiocese. And they were already, they had in-person services. And so, so I guess, he registered, did whatever he had to do. And then he was going to go into in-person service. And this is a white young man, but, his skin is a little bit dark, dark curly hair, kind of young man. And when he walked in, before he got in the door, he thought, wow, this looks so hospitable. And when he got to the door, they said, who are you? Why are you here? Mm. They did not want to let him in. And, and he said, I know they thought I was going to sabotage something, or maybe they thought I was going to come and shoot them. And I thought about it, and that made me so sad. I do not blame the parish, because, we're still, so many of us remember the shooting in Charleston, South Carolina. So, where a white young man went and did Bible study with the people. Right. Lord have mercy, at Mother Emanuel in 2015, and then shot them. So when I think about what the African Americans in that parish might have been feeling and thinking, I do not blame them. The student, eventually he did get in and he observed things, and he said, normally they're very hospitable. And he even wrote in his paper, except to me, and he put in parentheses, ha ha. But to me, that wasn't a ha ha. To me, that was about what is it going to be like, as we all come back together in this age of so many people just shooting each other. How are our Black Catholic churches going to be and look? And I know that's a question for the wider Black worshiping communities. So those are the kinds of things that we are thinking about right now.
Our world now, we'll just speak about our country in particular.
Yes.
We're all in a way, traumatized in various ways. And that story just reflects one of the, I was going to say unintended consequences, but I can't even say that. It's just shaken us as Americans to our core, African Americans in particular. Now these spaces that are known to be a space of refuge and safety and community, mm-hmm. Now we have to look over our shoulders and say, who is that stranger? Mm-hmm. Whether no, this is a place where people can come and not be strangers, come into the community and, be welcome. But the state of things, and that's just no small thing. Like you said, your student wrote, ha ha, but it's no small thing. So did he end up staying or explaining?
He did stay.
Okay.
Yeah, he explained who he was. I think he said my name, and there are a few people in that parish community that actually know me. And then, then I realized that, what, I'm going to have letters of introduction, and to call somebody in the parish. And, it's going to have to be a different process, because I don't want to stop doing this, but it really is going to have to be a different process.
By way of introduction, I am sending these students on this date or these number of dates. It means an extra step has to be taken, because we can't take for granted our safety anymore, even in a house of worship.
Yes. And it's very interesting because Black churches aren't the only ones that have been shot up, but there is a long history, unfortunately, with violence being perpetrated against Black worshipers. So to continue to think about that and to definitely
ask you, yes. We were talking about some prominent people here, And I had to look at Cardinal Wilton D. Gregory.
Absolutely, yes.
How did this happen? So obviously people may not know, but here he has been, what should we say, promoted or what?
Yes, he has been elevated. Elevated, so he's been a bishop for a long time. And, even the idea of Black Catholic bishops, it wasn't until 1984 when out of the 320 some bishops in the United States, we had 10 Black bishops at that time. And so that's when some of those early documents began to be written about the Black Catholic experience. I don't believe we even have 10 at this point, but after Archbishop Gregory was elevated, he then became the Archbishop of Washington, D.C., of the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. And of course, there's a prominence right there. So then from there, we have our first African American cardinal. And that happened, I guess he was elevated, that was in 2020. You kind of go, it's 2020, y'all. What took so long?
Exactly.
Once again, what was the holdup? So, we continue to just be, what we've got there, they're stumbling along, struggling along, as the spiritual says, so we continue in that, but to have him there, to have a seat at a table that, we haven't had that elevated as of a seat before 2020. And like I said, there are African cardinals, but we certainly didn't have an African-American cardinal.
This conversation, as we say that, what took so long, right?
Mm-hmm.
It points to the fact that of how pervasive racism is.
Absolutely.
And I know, so for some people who are particularly Americans, who are not Black people, I think to some degree, white people forget or just don't know how pervasive racism is. And so for Black Americans, it rubs up against every aspect of our lives.
Every day.
Every day. So it's not like we can just say, oh yeah, these racist things happen out there sometime, somewhere else. Mm-hmm. It is an integral part of American life. And so for Black people in American life, it means that every day you are subject to microaggressions. And that's one of the things I think this moment of reckoning for America, for white Americans, has been coming to realize that, like, oh, if I'm white, I can step outside of a racial conversation. I don't have to engage with race, anti-racism. I don't really have to engage with any of those things. And because I know you, maybe we work together, we're neighbors, and we're cool, I assume that you can also step outside of the discourse or the experience.
Mm-hmm.
But no, because when I even go to my church, if you're Black Catholic, if I go to my church and I see, the people who've been elevated, I see who's at that table in Rome, I see, the list of African American people who are
on the road
to
sainthood.
I have to think to myself, wait, all these people are still waiting. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I mean. Like, wow, it's an indictment, really, and highlighting American racism, where it's like, no, we don't ever get a break from it. And every institution that exists in America, there is racism within it, such that there's a separate, a racially separate parallel.
Yes.
Schools, churches, it just
hospitals,
hospitals, exactly. And then so some white people will say, well, why do you have Black universities? Why do you still have that? Why do you have a Black denomination? Why do you even refer to yourself as a Black Catholic? And it's like, are you familiar with America?
Well, okay, so let's think about this some more. Yeah. Let's continue. When you think, when people might say, well, why aren't there more Black priests and more Black sisters? Well, historically, there used to be 4. Now there are 3 orders of Catholic sisters that are historically and presently African American. Now, even within those congregations, these days they also have Latinx women, and they've expanded around the world. So there are people of different heritages in these orders. However, there were many Black young women that when they wanted to join a religious order, wanted to join, it's not that they didn't like the Black orders, but they wanted to join, whatever one was close to them, or they had some friends within or whatever. And the experience that they had joining white orders, for so many of them were horrific, right. Microaggressions, not, macro aggressions, and even when you think about servant of God, Dr. Sister Thea Bowman. I just love saying her name. Yes. When you think about her, she entered a white order. She had to travel because she grew up in Canton, Mississippi. And the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration, they were in charge of a school there, Holy Child of Jesus Catholic School, that, was doing good work because the education for Black children in Canton, Mississippi, the public schools were certainly subpar, because this would have been in the 1950s. And so she went to this school. She was impressed by the sisters. And when she went to join, and she actually joined them at age 15, but that was fairly usual at that time. Oh. And so she had to ride on a train with the sisters to go to the mother house in La Crosse, Wisconsin. So it's 1,000 miles, okay. Now on that train, of course, when she got on the train, segregation was still in force. Now, she says she doesn't even know how it happened that she was allowed to ride with the white sisters. She wasn't told that she had to go into a segregated car. Somehow she did stay with them. Now, when she got into the order, yes, she did find some people that became her lifelong friends. And when she was dying of breast cancer, it was one of those people that she met, one of those sisters that, helped to take care of her. I mean, to her dying day and dying breath, absolutely. But she also had to endure micro and macro aggressions within the order. And then when she went out to teach in an elementary school, of course, because that's, they would send you right out to teach, fairly early on. And she went into a school in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And there were some of the parents there that when they found out that this was a Black sister, they didn't want their children taught by her. So there are all of these kinds of stories. And there's a really amazing scholar named Dr. Shannon D. Williams. And she wrote a whole book gathering stories, historic and, present stories from women, some of who persevered in their orders and some who did not, about the experience of Black women. Now, when we think about Black men, it was even harder for them, trying to go to a seminary. And when they got there, maybe there was only one Black person in the seminary, maybe one or two, and their experiences were just so difficult. Yes, there are some orders that are predominantly Black men, but many times you wouldn't necessarily want to go there. There's a wonderful priest from the Oakland area. And when he, was sensing his vocation and wanted to explore priesthood, they say to him, well, why don't you go and join the Josephites or order the SVDs, Society of Divine Word. Why don't you go there? And he said, I'm in Oakland. I'm not going to Mississippi. because you don't want me to be in a seminary here. Now, luckily for him, I think just a few years after that, he started to know one of either the rector of the seminary or maybe one of the bishops, and they said, "Oh, no, we are keeping you right here." But those kinds of experiences, they continue and the microaggressions continue up to our own day. And so then you might say, so now what? And even if it's not necessarily an aggression, what happens when you get into a place where the food and the clothing and the language and the way and the celebration of liturgy, where none of it seems to have a connection to what you know. And you can tell that it wasn't set up for you and doesn't help to support you. Yeah. So how can people persevere?
Yeah, it makes it harder because we don't want to have to compartmentalize ourselves.
Yes.
And then those people who were, early integrators, they really just had to bear the weight and in so many ways. Mm-hmm. Again, why we would revere them, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because, yeah, and I would also say too about the Black women who were becoming nuns, and some of the resistance they were facing was this idea, the stereotype about Black women, right? Like this constant hypersexualization, these stereotypes. Yes. of a Black woman not being holy or pure, like there's no way she could be. It's just a given in terms of her basic physicality.
Yes.
That she is not worthy, right, to teach or to lead others, to serve the community in the name of God, right, with this as a member of an order. And as we hear that, it sounds absolutely absurd. Here are people who consider themselves to be people of God who still maintain these stereotypes and these prejudices, to the extent that some of these women, Black women, they say, that's it, I can't do it. This is an assault upon my humanity.
Yes, absolutely.
And, it just goes to show like the stereotyping of the race and the like virulence against Black womanhood specifically comes to bear when they're trying to join orders. Like, no, you can't be, because your body is about something else. Your body is for labor. Your body is, this sexualized something that we own or possess, not representing God.
And not a colleague, an equal, and a sister.
Right.
So that, that idea. Now it's interesting. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it boggles the mind, although I can't say, it boggles the mind just because you think, how do you maintain that dichotomy in your mind where you're looking at someone who says, I want to serve God with you, and you say you can't because you're Black. Like, what are we
and now it's funny because we can even we'll go back to where we started with that idea of the invisibility. Especially if people haven't known that there were Black Catholics, or, many of these orders, the reason why the Black women wanted to join these orders is because, like Sister Sia, they encountered the sisters, or they met them, when they were working at a hospital, when the sisters were, running a hospital, or when the sisters were teaching them in school. And so even when people know that there are Black Catholics, then to think about, but what happens if they come into my order and now they're no longer somebody that I'm teaching, but they are somebody that is going to be one of my equals.
Right.
And there's a different sense. And then now thinking about the invisibility, okay? Right. Let me start this off by saying, I love Ava DuVernay. But one of the things, and one day, if I ever get to meet her, here we are out here in LA.
Right.
Besides saying I love you, one of the things I'm going to say is, why is it that in the Selma movie, when it was time, for the 1965 march, when it was time, when you have, Black men and women, and you've got, rabbis, and there even is a Black priest, that kind of thing. She left out Sister Antona Ebo, who was pretty much on the front row, a Black woman, a sister in full Catholic habit, who made the cover of the New York Times behind that march. Okay. How did she not get into the movie? I can't there's part of me, I love the movie, but every time they get to that spot, I just cringe. Because I thought, how invisible do you think we are? But to honor, Sister Ebo, who, she came down from St. Louis, and she was a sister in an order where it took a while for her even to be able to be trained as a nurse as she wanted to be, but she finally did. So then she, working in a hospital, just all of these incredible things about here. I'm looking here at her obituary, and it was incredible to think about the risk that she took. I mean, she was lucky that the bishop at that time said that they could go, because there were many bishops that said, if you are in a religious order or you are a priest, you are not allowed to march in this civil rights movement, including the bishop of Selma. But he would have been like, the bishop of Alabama, they weren't allowed to be a part of the march. They, of course, had to take care of the people after they got beaten to with a whole, inch of their lives. But to think of the risk that Sister Ebo took. She tells stories. She said she had her glasses on, and when the march was getting started, somebody said, "You better take those glasses off, sister."
And when you say that, I get a visual of that picture. I've seen that picture.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So you're right. Like, how did Ava DuVernay just?
Yes, just not even because she is there. And of course, there's the story of, I think it may have been either a year later or one of the white officials of the town said, in that civil rights movement, they even dressed a Black woman up like a nun.
Wow.
So talk about being invisible on all sides.
Because like in the imagination, Black women don't exist as nuns, even in the imagination.
Right. Even in the imagination, when of course they, we exist as nuns. Wow.
It makes me want to, maybe we have to.
We're going to make our own movie.
I'm going to say t-shirts, like iconic, the picture of Angela Davis has gotten to be, and so it's on t-shirts and everywhere, right? So
we need a Sister Ebo t-shirt, Antona Ebo.
Oh, exactly.
And it is such a beautiful picture of her on the cover of the New York Times. To me, that picture is just so beautiful and inspiring and empowering. Mm-hmm. So as we're getting toward the end here, I just want to point out, because I'm so excited. Can you say again about what you are helping to get started and what some of the goals are of there? Because I'm looking here, I've got the list here in front of me in terms of that consultation that we're doing.
I don't have the list in front of me.
Well, I do. All right. So you get us started and then I'll read the list, because it really goes along with what we've been talking about here.
Exactly. Okay. So it is a partnership between LMU Center for Religion and Spirituality and our local community partner, the African American Catholic Center for Evangelization. And we work together doing a lot of things, a lot of programming we try to collaborate on regularly. And so this is an online program that we hope to, well, not just hope, but we are in the planning stages of now rolling out. And we had a consult, I don't know, was it a week and a half ago now,
right?
Bringing in some, thoughts from some very esteemed Black Catholic people, yourself included, except you couldn't make the date, but here we are talking to you anyway, to gather like what is most important in terms of creating such a program. And we came up with that list of goals that you'll share with us, because we really want it to speak to the moment, but to also speak to being both Black and Catholic, like the richness of both, and not just roll this out like it's a class in African American studies, which I teach, right? We don't want it to be that. We want the Black aesthetic to be mixed together with the Catholic liturgy. Like what does this holistic thing look like? So take it away.
Here we go. Yes. And I really appreciate these goals. So to educate participants in the history of Black in the Catholic Church. Absolutely, we have got to let the wider Catholic Church know that we are here. And we need to let the wider Black church know that we are here. Absolutely.
So Skip Gates doesn't make the same mistake when he doesn't.
Absolutely. Now, what's interesting is that I made a donation, so I've got the book coming, and I hear that there's more about Black Catholics in the book that accompanies.
And we're gonna see.
But we're gonna see, absolutely. To guide people in being active participants in their faith. So we want all people, but definitely Black Catholics, to be enriched and to be participants in their faith. But, we might have some white Catholics and some Latinx Catholics and, some indigenous Catholics, because there certainly are some people from the indigenous communities on whose land we are that also have Catholicism as their faith tradition. So to encourage people about being active participants, and that means you got to bring who you are, just bring it. To enrich the practical experiences of participation by expanding the breadth and the depth and the knowledge of the relationship between service and justice in the Catholic Church. Absolutely.
Amen.
And I look forward to some of those books that we'll be reading together, like Racial Justice in the Catholic Church, and books like Birth of a Movement, Black Lives Matter in the Catholic Church. So to think about that. To ground participants in Blackness and Black culture and Black spirituality, such that the experiences, all of these experiences of Blacks, are privileged within the context of Catholicism. When I think about that, I think, what do we bring to the table? And from where do these things come? So, there's always a conversation about, are there some kind of African retentions? There are many things that we bring to the table, but we need to, I think it's great that we're thinking about highlighting them and lifting them up so that we'll know some of these things that we are bringing to the table. And then I think we'll have a better chance of learning how to integrate them. To prepare participants for a renewed sense of engagement within the Catholic Church as informed leaders and change agents. Absolutely. And it might be that we look at certain things like, that 2018 document called Open Wide Our Hearts. And, that addressed racism in terms of Blacks in the Catholic Church, in terms of the Latinx community in the Catholic Church, in terms of indigenous communities in the Catholic Church. But then to think about what was not a part of that document that needed to be. How can we have change? And, when I've been reading this book, there are many of the white bishops who do not want to engage with Black Lives Matter, or they look at that and they say, no, we can't be a part of that or even think about it. And they place all of that on the question of abortion. But there are some of the Black scholars and activists that said, we're thinking about holistic life, right, from beginning to end. Right. And we suspect that you're hiding behind the abortion issue as a way of being racist, as a way of being, a white supremacy. So we have to really be engaging that and thinking about it. And so the idea of being informed leaders and change agents. Exactly. We've got to be informed. Absolutely. Yeah. So just a couple more. To be intentional in connecting with participants such that respect and familiarity and love are evident in the culture and relationships that are being developed. Now, what I love about this is that I'm sure some of this is going to wind up being online. And it's great because we can gather people from around the country, right, to be a part of this. Because what some people don't know, you might think, well, all Black Catholics are worshiping in Black Catholic churches. No, the majority, over 67% of Black Catholics do not worship in a church where they are anywhere near a majority. And so the only times we've had a chance to get together would be at a conference, maybe once a year or twice a year. So the idea that we can form that kind of online community that I think will be very supportive to people as we continue to learn and grow together. And the last one then, to promote critical thinking such that engagement with faith is encouraged as much as one's individuality and spiritual formation. I absolutely love that. How can we, I know I like these. Okay?
I love your enthusiasm. You're like preaching it. I'm like, I am feeling this. You know?
Well, you know, when you think about, you know, especially to have been here in, you know, my spirit, you know, my cocoon, my spot, you know, one thing that actually has been empowering and very helpful is the kind of prayer, the liturgy of the hours that are a part of the Catholic tradition. So they're parts of our faith that have been really helpful to get through this time. Other things that have been helpful, knowing that there are churches like Our Lady of Lourdes in Atlanta, where every single week the musicians there do a virtual choir. And it's an incredible thing. It's a lot of work, but they've got it down now. So, you know, to be able to hear that and to think about this. So, you know, I'm looking forward to getting together. And you know what? We're almost done, but while you're finishing up here, I'm going to find a virtual choir piece to show, because I think that'd be a good way to end our time together.
I said, she's going to sing a benediction out, because, you know, when you go into song, it really shifts the energy in the space. Even though here we are looking at this through a computer, when you sing, it just shifts something, and you can feel it in yourself and in your space. If we were like in a church together, like it changes the space, right? Like, who is it? Bernice.
Oh, Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan talks about that.
And she's like, you know, I love when she says that, because I feel it myself. I'm like, I remember that. Like, it changes. You catch the Holy Spirit.
Yes. Okay, so how about this? I have one for you, and we'll use this, and then we'll say goodbye to everybody. This is, I'll be singing up there. And this is, we call this group Black Catholic Voices United. And you know why we had to unite? Because out on the internet, somebody said, these are Catholic voices singing during the pandemic. And there wasn't not one Black person involved. And so a group of us got together and said, And so I'll show you what we came up with. This is Black Catholics from all over the country. We got ourselves together and we raised some funds. And all right, so hang on a second here. I'm going to have to share my screen, and then it'll be time for us to go. All right.
I'll be singing up there. I'll be singing up there. Come on up to bright glory. I'll be singing up there. I'll be singing up there. I'll be singing up there. Come on.
I'll be singing up there. There
was
you go.
wonderful. You're right. They got it together to make that word.
I mean, it's really amazing because yes, we did that as a protest, but you can see we are shouting.
Amazing, actually. And I see you there, and you're listed as a, what did you say, project director?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because I was giving a presentation for the Hymn Society of the United States and Canada. And so it was last year, you know, and it was pandemic time. So that conference where I was supposed to actually be in Atlanta presenting to, you know, a church filled with people, you know, from around US and Canada and some other places. And it all moved online. And they said, well, now that we're moving online, if you want to put together a virtual choir, you know, we can, you know, give you some support to be able to do that. And then everything happened with, you know, getting together the Black Catholic Voices United. And I said, well, I'll take their support and we'll get that together. So that's how that came to be.
That works. That is beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay. And well, let's wrap it up here. And I just want to thank you, Dr. Kim Harris, for, I mean, girl, I want to say you worked. I want to give you a high five and say you've been educated and you have sung and you have shared. And, you know, I just, okay, you got it.
So, hey,
thank
you so much, Dr. Darnise, you know, and I look forward to our continuing conversations together and our work together here at LMU. And I can't wait till, you know, with that whole consultation gets going. I just am very excited about it. Can you tell? Can you tell?
Your enthusiasm, because, you know, I'll be like, we need you to come do this.
And thank you to Michael McNaught for, you know, being our technical person this evening. And we're so glad all of you who joined us live on Facebook, and those of you that will see us on YouTube and all those other times and places. We're looking forward to seeing you virtually and eventually in person somehow.
All right. Good night, everybody.
So good night, everybody.